We found the ghost by the road. Written and narrated by ladyspookariayt, and featuring Silver Underworld, Ghost Inc., Dark Apostles ASMR, and Miss Creepy Tales. I started traveling years ago as a way to see the world. There is something beautiful about meeting new people and experiencing cultures different to your own, especially when you do it with friends. I love listening to the local legends, the folk tales, and getting a chance to experience it all. When I am home, I tend to be far more introverted and quiet, keeping to myself much more. But when I am traveling, I will happily go up and speak with people. You could say my extrovert side comes out. I love ghost stories in particular, and I'm a big believer in the paranormal. That being said, I don't get upset when things are faked or exaggerated. The possibility of it being real is what makes it exciting. And I'm a sucker for when things are comical or otherwise entertaining. It's the experience that matters. I brought 3 friends along with me. Each of them have their own interest in the paranormal and reason for being here. All of us want to find evidence of the paranormal someday. James, I swear, he's cranky all the time and a complete perfectionist. While Freddy is hyper all the time and loves pulling pranks on people. Then there is Cecilia, the unofficial mum of the group. She keeps us all out of trouble. There were rumors of a ghostly figure walking along a road, and occasionally he would venture into people's homes. People would smell burnt clothing and blood, whispered words they couldn't understand, and the sound of clanking armor. The neighboring areas were the site of many battles throughout history. It sounded interesting, and it was close to several different restaurants and bars, some boutique antique stores, and it was up the road from some ruins. Since the tourist season had passed, it meant prices would be a lot lower, and we could get a good deal in a place. We thought it was perfect. We booked an Airbnb that looked good, plenty of space and for a good price. It was close to the area, so we would have to travel a bit to get to the road. The road has been used since Roman times, and has changed little over the centuries. So, the main outline is the same.
Hi, we don't want ghosts being the forest home.
Freddy laughed, ever the jokester.
Yes, I agree. Hey, did you all bring something warm to wear? It gets cold during this time of year.
Cecilia, the mother of the group, inquired. Always she wanted to make sure that everything was in its proper place and everyone was looked after, even if we didn't agree.
I would only believe it when I see it.
James chimed in, held some of the ghost hunting equipment on his back, and had the same serious expression he always did. He frowned, pulled up his heavy backpack with all of the equipment and grumbled. Unfortunately, he also had a controlling streak. Me? I was happy. It was dusk. The sky had a pink hue to it, and I spun around in place. I was in the company of friends, oblivious to the stares of the locals and my friends' unimpressed expressions. I was happy.
I want to make sure that we get an Airbnb soon. I need to double check it.
James started, only to be interrupted by Cecilia.
I just hope it's clean and looks the same as the pictures.
Cecilia fussed, subconsciously picking imaginary dust off her clothes.
Come on, we're here for adventure, not all about anything else. Anyways, it's just a block away, and then we're there. Landlord had the key, and we'll be back tomorrow in the morning.
Freddy added, a bright smile on his face as he did so.
The local restaurants look good. We should have a look and see.
Cecilia thought out loud to herself. I was just happy to listen to them all talk.
We need to check the security of this place and settle in first.
James said. He looked at his phone to check the address, lifted the welcome mat up to grab the key, and unlocked the door. Still frowning, but one by one, we filed into the Airbnb and started to look around. James was checking all the windows, both for security and to ensure an easy exit if there was some funny business going on. I always thought he was overly paranoid about these sorts of things. Since he was the only one who spoke Italian, he called the landlord, told him that we had arrived, and that we were settling in. I could hear Cecilia in the kitchen, opening all the cupboards, and probably making a mental checklist of everything we would need. Freddie was, well, who knows. I was walking around the home, gazing at the different statues and paintings on the walls. Most of it was based on the local countryside around us, through different stages of history. From the ancient ruins, I'm pretty sure I saw some farmland from the 17th century, and it was interesting to see how the land had changed over time. There were statues of local heroes, and I had no idea who most of them were. I cursed myself for not bringing my sketchbook to draw on. The light shifted, and I leaned close to one of the paintings. I thought I saw a... Ow! I felt something smack the back of my head. I raised my hand to soothe the ache and the potential bump on it. There was Freddie, his stupid grin, and he waved at me. I exhaled and smacked his arm. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, but I couldn't help smiling to myself.
Hi, dinner's ready. Cecilia whipped us something for us to eat. Come on.
He said, walking into the dining room. I walked behind him, still rubbing the back of my head, and grumbled, "I'm gonna get you back for that smack." Cecilia had cooked up a pasta dish, got some wine ready and some salad. It was all set out nicely. We were all incredibly hungry. We ate in silence, and even Freddie had managed to be quiet while he had done so. I was the one who broke the silence. "Are we gonna do some daytime investigations? You know, to ask people about the ghosts, or are we gonna do that all at nighttime?"
I don't want us to be influenced by the opinions of the town people. I want us to go in with fresh eyes.
James insisted, while Cecilia and Freddie shrugged.
We could go shopping during the day instead.
Cecilia looked at me and I instantly nodded.
We could look for hot spots for ghost activity.
Freddie added with a mouthful of food, not giving a single fuck about us or seeing it. Ugh, gross.
Freddie, no.
What about you, James?
I'll make sure we get everything set up and ready to go. I guess we'll meet up here about 5:30 p.m. Could you bring some food home with you?
Later, the four of us hung out and enjoyed ourselves. Then we all went to our separate beds. I was so excited for the next day, and I struggled to actually get to sleep. I hoped the ghost would pass through the home to give us a visit, or something dramatic would happen. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to be the case. We all woke up the next day.
I had a dream that I was walking along a long road.
I didn't dream at all. It was strange for me not to dream. Ever since we stayed here, my vivid dreams came to a halt.
There was a skeleton woman who kept calling for me.
Cecilia paused and continued, her eyes wide with fear.
She kept telling me it was time.
James was frustrated, more so than usual, and the three of us all looked at him, expecting an answer or something. Normally had some kind of an explanation for what was happening.
I didn't dream either. Come on, all of you, go out. I need a nap or something.
He mumbled to himself, stood up and walked back to his room. He slammed the door behind him. The rest of us looked at each other concerned. Finally, we shrugged, ready to go out and do our own thing. Still, I knew by the look on my friends' faces. We were all concerned about him. We all left and checked out the local antique stores. I enjoyed looking at all these items. Each of them were too bulky and expensive to try to take home with us, but it was nice to window shop. It was an enjoyable day. We were nearly late when we got back home, but made sure to grab some pizza before we got back. It smelled delicious and our stomachs growled as we walked. When we walked in, we saw James staring at a closed door. We stopped, looked at each other again. "What the hell?"
James?
Cecilia asked, approached him and gently touched his arm. James flinched and turned to face us. He looked like he hadn't slept for weeks, when it had only been one night. It took him a moment to realize who we all were.
Oh, hey.
He answered.
Are you good to go out later tonight?
Freddie asked, and for once the silly smile was on his face. We're here for a couple of days so you can get some rest. Cecilia and I both looked deeply concerned for a moment. James, however, was brought back to his senses. He cleared his throat and shook his head.
Yeah, I'm good. Come on. Time to get ready. I won't let whatever this is get in the way.
Are you sure? Okay. Let's eat and make sure you wear something warm tonight. I booked a tour down the road. I figured we'd try and play by the rules.
Cecilia gave an affectionate yet triumphant smile. Our dinner was uneventful. We chatted, ate, and kept wondering why James seemed so different. It wasn't like him to be so sullen and withdrawn from us. We double-checked everything, locked up, and walked to the town square to meet the tour guide, along with the other travelers. There was a mixture of couples, some younger and some older. Most of them had a distinct tourist vibe. There was a chill in the air. For a moment, James stared at nothing and started to murmur words under his breath. He spoke as though in a trance. Each word whispered harshly, in determination.
Must. Them. I must.
Hey, what's going on?
Freddie asked, squeezed his best friend's shoulder and waited. James jumped, blinked and looked confused. I barely heard the rest of the conversation taking place behind me. I was listening to the tour guide speak. I could barely understand when he broke into Italian, but I understood enough. The town was old, established during early Roman times, and likely much earlier. The medieval period was extremely difficult, down through the Renaissance, and then he started talking about modern history, something I'm not particularly interested in. Mentally, I tapped out and looked over my shoulder at the boys. They were deep in conversation. I nudged Cecilia gently with my elbow to get her attention, and nodded back in their direction. The pair of us walked towards them. Cecilia spoke up first.
James, are you okay?
She asked. James didn't answer at first until Freddie nodded. Freddie was focused and I wondered what had happened.
All right.
James sighed and frowned.
I still don't entirely believe, this.
He continued.
I thought I was tired and out of it. I saw a shadowy figure walk through the house. Hell, I saw several people walk through the house. I can remember screaming and I could smell burning flesh and blood.
He paused and we all looked at each other, absolutely baffled about what we should do. We all stayed silent while the noise of the town filled our ears. We were captivated by him.
I could hear something. The words, they weren't in English at first. They were in Italian. Or an older version of it.
What did it say? Do you remember?
Cecilia asked softly.
I must. Them. There was something else too. I just can't remember the exact words as they came out.
James shrugged, sat down on a bench in a park, and we joined him. Not sure what to say, but wanting to support him. It was strange. I wanted to ask the tour guide about it. Unfortunately, he was occupied with tourists asking him a lot of questions. I've never been a pushy person, I decided to wait until the tourists finished asking their questions. Hey, I'm gonna go over and ask the tour guide some questions soon. So, if I disappear, that's where I am. They nodded. James looked pale. Like all the life had been drained from his face. It wasn't like him. James never got sick.
How many ghosts do you think hang around here? And if so, why do they move on?
Freddie mused to himself, caught up in his thoughts, clearly wondering about the ghosts we may or may not encounter.
You know, I wonder if our dreams are all connected to whoever this ghost was. Oh! So I had a dream about walking along a long road. Cecilia,
he said, pointing to Cecilia.
Cecilia, you had a dream about skeleton woman calling for you. Actually, wait, no, that doesn't make sense.
I frowned. Honestly, I sulked. Everyone else had a dream and I dreamt of absolutely nothing.
Hey, I can't help if I dreamed about it. The woman didn't say anything to me in my dream.
Cecilia tried to remember, tapped her temple with her fingertips and frowned. Nothing came to mind. I felt awkward and looked towards the direction the tour group was. Already, they had all left. They were gone. Oh my god, they have left! I called out in frustration. I guess we'll have to do our own study. I looked at the other three. None of them looked happy or willing to stay out. I didn't want to waste our trip, because I had a feeling we would regret it later on. How about we all go for a walk down the main road? It's still pretty early and we can get something to eat, I offered. Freddie most of the time was always down to eat. We walked together down the long road. I was happy we were all quite fit because it was quite a long way. After a while, it grew darker and colder. We were in good spirits, sipping our overpriced drinks, and watched every store close for the evening. The older style of the buildings and the mist gave the area a spooky atmosphere. A man walked past us. He was semi-transparent. We all gasped as we walked him. The human man nodded to us and kept going on his way. But it was just the mist. False alarm. We walked towards the ruins of the destroyed castle. It was fenced off, but that wasn't going to stop us.
So?
Freddie answered with a mouthful of food.
This place had a lot of battles throughout history. Apparently it was finally destroyed during World War II.
He said. He was quite the modern history buff.
It is freezing and...
Cecilia stopped and stared as a figure walked through the mist. It looked like a male figure stumbling around in the darkness. He would appear for a moment and disappear once again.
Hello?
She called out into the darkness and rapidly gestured with her hand for us to gather around. I thought it could have been the same man from before, or even a homeless person we could have disturbed from his sleep. I stood beside her and looked. Suddenly it felt colder than it had before. A sharp, sudden cold that made our teeth chatter.
Sorry, mate. We didn't mean to disturb you.
Freddie called out and waved. It was possible he thought the same thing that I did. We heard James's loud footsteps as he came up behind us. He didn't say anything. I didn't turn to look at him. I just raised my hand to give him a wave of hello. The stumbling stranger in the distance didn't respond to us, nor did he change his course. He was headed down the way we came, as if driven by some unseen force. It bordered on being unnatural. Cecilia turned and looked at James, placed a hand gently on his cheek.
James, are you okay?
She asked. James looked stunned. The lights were on, but nobody was home.
James, hey, what's wrong?
I looked at James for a moment, and back at the stranger stumbling down the small hill. James' focus was locked on him. When I looked back at James, then back at the stranger. Who was he? Why was James so fixated on him? I think it would be best if we managed to get him back to the Airbnb. It's getting colder, and the others didn't need convincing. We made our way through the mist, and I wish I brought something to light our way. We walked down and I heard the sound of whispers.
You belong to us now. You belong to us now. You are ours. The dead. The dead. The dead. We are the dead, and so are you. And so are you. And so are you. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. It is your time. It is your
The sound of battle faintly around us. And we started seeing ghosts. We came seeking ghosts. However, they were the ones who found us. They could barely be seen through the mist.
I can see her.
Cecilia called out, grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. I looked to where she was pointing. There was a woman. She flickered between being a beautiful woman, her curves highlighted by both her hair and the transparent gown swirling around her, and then it flicked back to a grisly, vile skeleton. Oh fuck, I murmured. The urge to run and get back to safety became greater. Freddie was dragging James down the road with him, with James murmuring something under his breath that neither of us could make out. Freddie held his arm on one side, while Cecilia took the other side with me. We let him down and began to hear him.
I must, them.
James whispered, before he roughly began to struggle and turn back the way we had come, back in the direction of the ruined castle.
James, stop!
Cecilia called out.
Come on!
Freddie complained. Can you hear that? The sounds of men fighting? I asked them. They looked at me as though I was losing my mind. I fell silent and kept helping them lead James down. We finally got back to the main street, where the modern houses and businesses were. We started to cough and cover our faces, and the smell of burning flesh filled our nostrils. Ash burned at our skin in sharp contrast to the chill in the air. The wind was growing wilder, rougher, and ready to cling onto our clothes. The environment became hostile, and I now knew why the townspeople hid in their houses. I lost track of the group and fell back. I saw him. He looked different now. This one didn't panic or sway. He walked with a determined and steady pace, like he'd been doing this for centuries. He stood there, his face misshapen from a wound, dried blood on his face, and his armor clung to pieces of his body. There was a look of irritation on his face as I stood in his way. I stammered, wanted to run in the opposite direction, but I couldn't find a way around him. In the distance, I heard my friends scream, and they all practically leapt at the skull woman, the one I thought of as the Reaper. There were whispers of her too. I never expected any of this to actually be true. As the skull woman took their hands into her own, their bodies went limp, and I could see their spirits. Around me there were many figures, garbed in clothing from different time periods. Some were sobbing, others wailing, others cackling, and some were so calm. Too calm. "What are you doing?" Like an irritated actor, repeating a line he'd been forced to say.
I must warn them,
He said. How many times had he repeated this before? Surely they were warned by now. Warn who? Is it someone around here? Oh, do you mean James? The sounds of the dead surrounded me. The ghost did not answer. His hand tightened on the sword in his hands,
You belong to us.
and I definitely understood that meaning. I needed to be careful. Still, I needed to know. I had to know. Who are you?
I am the Knight of the Road.
And now, he walked with even more souls. I hope you enjoyed this story. Did you recognize the little Easter eggs? Anyway, check out this link if you haven't seen the first part of this story. I would like to thank my guests, Ghost Inc., Dark Apostle ASMR, Silver Underwood, and Miss Creepy Tales, my BB, for joining me on this video. Please check them out and subscribe if you enjoyed them. They're definitely worthwhile. Don't forget to stab the like button, comment and subscribe for more spooky content. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreons, top tippers, subscribers. All support is greatly appreciated. Check out my social media links in the description down below. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.